The Senate will be in order. The senator from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. President, I'm taking this time. I understand there's a break in the action in regards to the underlying bill. If I'm wrong on that, I'll yield the floor to someone in regards to moving us forward, but I understand that we're not ready for the next issue yet. So with that in mind, let me just take this time as the chair of the U.S. Helsinki Commission representing the United States Senate in the Helsinki Commission. My Republican counterpart is Senator Wicker. I also have the opportunity, Senator Wicker, by the way, chairs is the Vice President of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Parliamentary Assembly, and I am the Special Representative on Anti-Semitism, Racism, and Intolerance. The Helsinki Final Act speaks very clearly against all forms of intolerance and discrimination. And we've seen in recent months current events trigger latent bias in our community. We go back to 9/11, where we saw the uprise of hate against the Muslim community, which was translated into violence against Muslim Americans. We saw during COVID-19 latent bias against the Asian American community. As a result, we saw a rise of hate.
The Senate will be in order. Please take your conversations out of the chamber.
Mr. President, we saw a rise of anti-Asian activity and bias and violence, and this body took action. And once again, as a result of recent violence in the Middle East, we see a rise of anti-Semitism here in the United States and around the world. I mention all of that because we need to speak out whenever we see the rise of intolerance in our community. So let me just talk about anti-Semitism and what's happened recently. A 29-year-old Jewish man was punched, kicked, and pepper sprayed last week in New York in broad daylight as a group of men yelled anti-Semitic statements. People in cars began throwing bottles and yelling anti-Semitic slurs, including words like dirty Jew, at a dinner party in Los Angeles. In Skokie, Illinois, someone shattered a window at a synagogue. In Bal Harbor, Florida, men yelled die Jew at a man in a skull cap and then threatened to rape his wife and daughter. These instances are compounded by an uptick in anti-Semitic speech online, with the Anti-Defamation League finding 17,000 tweets between May 17th and May 7th and May 14th, 1 week, with some variation of the phrase, Hitler was right. These attacks follow the January 6th Capitol insurrection earlier this year, where white supremacist and extremist groups displayed anti-Semitic and racist symbols and recited conspiracy theories blaming Jews for the pandemic. These conspiracy theories have proliferated alongside anti-Semitic stereotypes and images being mainstreamed by some political leaders and public figures. While these events are shocking, perhaps we should not be surprised. The ADA Global Index on Anti-Semitism, updated in 2019, found that more than 1 billion people, nearly 1 in 8 around the world, harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Over 30% of those surveyed said it was probably true that Jews have too much control over financial markets, that Jews think that they are better than other people, that Jews are disloyal to their country, and that Jews hate, and that people hate Jews because of the way Jews behave. A full 41% think Jews are more loyal to Israel than the country they live in. Such sentiments too often translate into violence, leaving 40% of European Jews to report in 2018 that they lived in daily fear of being physically attacked. Here at home, Jews make up fewer than 3% of the American population, but the majority of reported religious-based hate crimes targeted Jewish people and institutions. I strongly agree with ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt, who said last week, we are witnessing a dangerous and drastic surge in anti-Jewish hate. To those who choose to indulge in age-old anti-Semitic tropes, exaggerated claims, and inflammatory rhetoric, it has consequences. Attacks in real life on real people targeted for no other reason than they are Jewish. This is anti-Semitism, plain and simple, and it is indisputable and inexcusable in any context. In 2004, I had the opportunity to represent America at the Berlin Conference on Anti-Semitism, where we developed an action plan to stand up against anti-Semitism. The very first recommendation coming out of the Berlin Conference is that leaders must speak out against anti-Semitism in any form, that leaders need to be heard, they cannot be silent. So, Mr. President, I was very pleased when our president, Joe Biden, stated this past week, the recent attacks on the Jewish community are despicable and they must stop. I condemn this hateful behavior at home and abroad. It's up to all of us to give hate no safe harbor. Thank you, President Biden. I was proud of our colleague, Senator Mazie Hirono, a leader in the Asian American community, who posted on social media, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. We must all condemn the recent surge of anti-Semitic attacks in our country. Each of us needs to stand up, speak out, and confront this hatred. At my last in-person OSCE meeting before the COVID-19, I hosted an event with my European colleagues entitled Lessons from the Past, Leadership for the Future, where we spoke about the lessons from the Holocaust, including early warning signs from the past, some of which have been rising to the surface again. These early warning signs include the rise of populist leaders, demonizing of minorities, propagandizing of hate, and the neglect of refugee protection, which ultimately became the factors that resulted in genocide. This month, I chaired a Helsinki Commission hearing on preventing mass atrocities with Professor Timothy Snyder and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum Center for the Prevention of Genocide Director Naomi Kolker. This center's early warning project provides an innovative risk assessment tool using quantitative and qualitative methods to spotlight countries where mass atrocities have not begun, but where the risk of such violence is high. The warning signs are there. My colleagues, we are painfully reminded of our past. The OSCE has repeatedly reaffirmed that hate crimes pose a threat to the security of individuals and societies, given their potential to lead conflict and violence on a wider scale. The spread of hateful ideology and recent acts of hate crimes and extremism across the OSCE region attests to this. In response, I have called for a plan of action to address violence and discrimination across the OSCE region, including here in the United States, so that we may have more strategic and cross-border approach to addressing hate. I've also supported the OSCE initiatives that address security concerns of Jewish communities, including by improving relationships between law enforcement and justice institutions in vulnerable communities, educating communities on anti-Semitism and how to counter it, and building alliances with other communities to counter hate. Over the past decade, I've also worked to ensure that the State Department's budget annually includes funding to fight anti-Semitism globally by creating civil society partnerships between the United States and Europe, to work as allies to fight against anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, anti-Muslim bigotry, hostility to the LGBTQ+ community, and other forms of hate. The United States should be a global leader in fighting such intolerance. It would be hypocritical for us as a nation to preach to the world against hate if we let it fester and grow here at home. Like a virus, as we all know too well, if hate exists in one country, it has the capacity to spread around the world. Therefore, I ask all my Senate colleagues to join me in supporting these efforts at home and abroad to achieve safe and just society for all. Hate takes many forms, but none of them should be acceptable here in the United States of America or anywhere else in the world. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.